This morning we'll be picking up in Matthew chapter 5, where we've been for several weeks now. Moving on down, we're all the way down at verse 33 of Matthew chapter 5. They're filling up the elevator. That's a good noise. So consider this morning. What is someone's word worth? If you've had a similar experience to me just living in our modern culture, then you'll probably agree with the well-known idiom, talk is cheap, is it not? Oftentimes, many people's actions don't match up to the words that they say, and that then decreases the value of what they have spoken. Like the boy who cried wolf, when people in our lives make a habit of saying one thing and doing another, then we naturally just don't feel like their word is worth very much at all. Believe me, as a person who's trying to minister to our community and build our church, I've had many experiences, more than you would think, in which unsolicited people have said to me, wow, your church sounds really cool. I can't wait to come. They'll even look me in the eye and say, I will see you Sunday. And I've never heard from most of those people again. I didn't even ask them to be like that. I didn't ask for that verbal commitment, and yet they gave it and did not follow through. This happens frequently. I'm kind of used to it at this point. The unfortunate truth about many people in our world is that talk is cheap. Words do not carry much weight because all too often those words are not backed up by action. We all know this. Now, this phenomenon is not specific to our time and our culture either. As long as there have been people, there have been liars. And as Jesus continues his Sermon on the Mount, as we'll see today, having already given us plenty of reason to feel convicted, remember, we've already talked about how anger is likened to murder and how lust is likened to adultery. Jesus now turns his attention specifically to this idea of honesty. Jesus knew that for many people, talk was cheap. And just like with the other issues, Jesus will show us that simply following a rule is not enough. We need to address the heart issue behind these moral regulations that he's going through in this Sermon on the Mount. And as Jesus teaches us today about swearing, we will see that it is about much more than taking oaths. It's about having integrity in our speech and hearts that love the truth. And I think that we can all be challenged to be people of truth and integrity in our speech. We should be people whose talk is not cheap. So, picking up where we left off last week, look with me in Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 through 37. Jesus says, again, you've heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. So when you were a child, you can imagine on the playground, when you were talking to your friends, you're telling them something relatively unbelievable, and you would say that it was true by saying something along the lines of, I swear on my mother's grave, right? Or you may have said something like, I swear on a whole stack of Bibles. And when you say that, the point of swearing was to add authority and add weight to your words. Saying those things is putting yourself under a particular authority or consequence. We might say something along the lines of, I cross my heart and hope to die. You remember saying that as a kid, right? It's because your word alone wasn't trustworthy enough. You had to add to it. Your word is not substantial enough to be believed on its own. And so you say, I swear on my mother's grave. And what that really means is, I would rather my mother die than lie to you. And we may not say it outright like that, but that's basically what that means. Or when we say, I swear on a stack of Bibles, we would mean something along the lines of, I'm putting myself on the line under the authority of this word of God. Now, I'm not sure why a stack of Bibles is any more authoritative than just one, but whatever, right? The point was to assure others via an outside force or authority that you were telling the truth. And back at the time of Jesus, when there weren't as many civil or legal systems in place to ensure truthfulness, they had to go by people's word for things. They had to make deals make promises, incur debt based on the word of a person, because they didn't have the modern luxuries that we all enjoy of endless contracts and user agreements and signed documents and Face ID and disclosures and e-sign verifications and all that paperwork that we all just love so much, right? We have all these mechanisms in place to ensure that legally we will be held accountable for telling the truth. But in Jesus' day, they just didn't have that. And so the word of a person had to suffice. Now, not just for telling outlandish stories, but for practical everyday agreements, people relied on the swearing that had to take place that you would do what you said you would do. So people would swear on various authorities that they would follow through and pay what they owe. Even the Pharisees and other religious leaders from the Jewish community where Jesus was, many of them would swear and make oaths in various ways, even though Jesus is saying they should have known better than to do that. So as we just read, Jesus again references some of the teaching of the Old Testament. He says there very clearly, you have heard that it was said from the times of old, from those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. Now, like the other two sections that we have read before in the Sermon on the Mount, we could read that as an interpretation of one of the Ten Commandments. The other two Ten Commandments we saw before, but this could be related to Exodus chapter 20, verse 16. One of the Ten Commandments says, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Lying is bad. We'll talk about that more in just a little bit. But Jesus is actually referencing something a little bit more specific about swearing falsely, not just speaking falsely. And the command that Jesus is actually referencing comes up several specific times in the Old Testament. I want to share those references with you this morning. First of all, we read this in Numbers chapter 30, verse 2. This command is given. It says, if a man vows a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to bind himself by a pledge, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. Now, again, we see this idea echoed elsewhere. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 4 says something similar. It says, when you vow a vow to God, do not delay paying it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you owe. And once more, we see this idea reflected again in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 12 in the Old Testament. It says, this is God speaking directly. He says, you shall not swear by my name falsely, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. So then we understand that within the Jewish community at least, it was well known and understood that they should not make a vow or swear an oath specifically using the name of God as they swear. Because if they break that vow, then they would be understood to be under the judgment of God, right? In other words, if you attach the authority of God himself to your spoken promise, then you better fulfill and follow through with what you have said, or else you will be held accountable to the authority upon which you swore. God's name is to be feared, not thrown around as some kind of insurance policy for your deal making. And so you should not swear by his name lightly. And furthermore, if you do swear by his name, then you better come through with what you said, or else you will come under his judgment. So religious Jews understood this. They knew this. So like other laws that Jesus had spoken about so far, most of these people could say with a non-guilty conscience, I have not done that. I don't swear by God's name. I have not made an oath and invoked the name of the Lord. I haven't done that, so I am not guilty, right? But Jesus was fully aware that they may not have done that, but they were misunderstanding the point of what they were doing. You see, instead of swearing by the name of God, many people in their various dealings and agreements would instead swear by something else. Like Jesus listed there in the verse, they may swear by heaven, or they would swear by earth, or they would swear by Jerusalem, or they would swear on their own head. Now, if they knew that swearing under the name of God was probably a bad idea, then why would they still swear under something else? Well, I think that we can assume the answer is because they didn't plan on following through with what they said, right? This was a mechanism for deception. It was a mechanism for them to be able to lie, or to at least have the safeguard that they could say, if I don't come through in paying this debt, or if I don't come through on this agreement that I swore upon heaven or earth or Jerusalem or whatever, then that's okay because at least I didn't swear on the name of God. You see, this was a loophole that they were trying to violate, right? So yes, they were technically following the letter of the law. They were not swearing in the name of God, but they were missing the heart of the law, that cheapening your words by lying is bad. So I think the overall message of Jesus in this portion of the Sermon on the Mount that we read today could be summarized like this. The first blank on your sheets today is that we are always accountable to God for our words and actions. Remember, when we began our study about the Sermon on the Mount, we talked about how Jesus has been establishing that he is this new and coming king. And if we're living under the good and perfect rule of this King Jesus, we need to understand it's not just about checking boxes and following commands specifically to the letter. No, it's about having hearts that are changed. Because what Jesus is saying here specifically is everything is under his authority. There are no loopholes for lying. Swearing on something else is just swearing on another thing that is also under his authority as the omnipotent king of the universe. And that's why Jesus says, don't swear by heaven. That's the throne of God. He says, don't swear by earth. That's his footstool. Don't swear by Jerusalem, he said, because it's the city of the king. All of those things are under the same authority and rule of God, and so are you. And so Jesus says, don't even swear on your own head, because he points out, you don't even have the power and authority to decide which hairs are gray and which ones are not. Believe me, I know, right? I can't change this, so swearing on my own head is a useless thing to do, because even my own head is under that same authority of God. So what Jesus is beginning to say here is this: you can swear by anything you want. That thing is still under God's authority. So it's the same thing as swearing to God. So ultimately, it doesn't matter what you swear on. It's all under his power and control and not yours. And you will be held accountable for what you swear. Your words and actions will be held accountable by God. And so the implication is that our words should carry weight. They should be reliable and trustworthy. Talk is not meant to be cheap. We should do what we say we will do because we live under the rule and reign of God in all things. Now, there's one more verse in the Old Testament that references the same idea, but it says something a little more specific. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 21 to 23. In this, God says, if you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay fulfilling it, for the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and you'll be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from vowing, you will not be guilty of sin. You shall be careful to do what has passed your lips, for you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. So hear that last part really clearly. Whatever you have said or promised, consider that to be a vow to the Lord. Whatever passes your lips, consider that to be a promise under his authority. That is what Jesus is reminding people of in this passage. He's saying our words matter. They should carry weight. And the reliability of the words that we used is a reflection of the God who we serve. And because of the nature of God and who he is, we are compelled to live as people who speak with integrity, who are honest and truthful in all of our dealings. Now, before we go on, I think if you're like me, as we read this passage, it doesn't feel super applicable to most of us, because how often are we really taking oaths or making vows, right? That doesn't feel like something that comes up a ton in our culture. But does it? When you married your spouse, did you not stand before people and take vows to that person? When we baptized people just a few weeks ago, did we not ask them to affirm certain statements, to promise that they were speaking truthfully about their belief in Jesus Christ? When you bought your house, did you not sign a contract that was binding to you? Because that is an important thing legally for you to be held accountable to pay what you pay. And so I think we are probably under more oaths than we would like to admit. So how do we balance that with Jesus' very clear words that we just read there in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, verse 34, where Jesus says, "But I say to you, do not take an oath at all." We ask ourselves, is Jesus saying that I was in sin for making vows to my wife? Was I in sin for taking the oath of taking a mortgage upon myself to pay for my house? Were those things sinful? Are we forbidden from making commitments or promises? Are we not allowed to vow and show allegiance and loyalty to make a formal promise or covenant? Now understand, there are some groups of people within our culture even today that take this teaching very literally. The Quakers, if a Quaker has to go and testify in court, for example, they will not place their hand upon the Bible and swear to tell the truth because of this specific passage. Because Jesus said, do not take an oath at all. They won't do it. Now, within the context of this passage, how are we supposed to understand this? Are we forbidden from doing anything like that? I think it seems most clear from Jesus' teaching in the context that we should not take oaths intending to break them. To do so would be intentionally dishonest and sinful. But further than that, I think we can understand that what Jesus is teaching here is not necessarily condemnation of all oaths or promises, but rather an exhortation that oaths should not be necessary. If we believe in him, if we understand that our words and actions will be held accountable by our God, then we should understand that everything we say should be truthful. Every word that crosses our lips should be understood almost as an oath. It is a promise. We are intended to be completely truthful. We're constantly living under this fear and authority of God over all things, anything that we could ever swear upon. And so we are called to have integrity in our speech. I believe the consistent message of all the scriptures that we've read regarding oaths this morning is this: all of our words should be trustworthy and true. We shouldn't take an oath or make a vow in order to be believed. Our track record of honest, truthful speech should, in most cases, be enough. And if we're truly submissive to God, a God who cannot lie, a God who is the source of truth, then we ought to speak truthfully at all times. Furthermore, if we claim to love our God, then that means that we should be lovers of truth. Jesus calls himself the way, the truth, and the life. And we can show our love for Jesus as the truth by demonstrating truthfulness in all things. More than the potential gain we might receive from lying, our utmost loyalty is to our God, the God of truth, always. So then, on a very practical level, let's just say you are called to testify in court. And they do ask you to place your hand on the Bible and tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. At this point, you may be wondering, should I not do that? Jesus said, do not take an oath at all. I think there's room for you to still do it, but you can take that oath in the way that you want. You could place your hand on the Bible and say, I do swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, now as always, because I am constantly under the authority of God. Does that make sense? Your vow is only condemned if it is broken. And you should be able to say in all honesty in a court of law or in any situation that I am a person who is speaking the truth. I'm always under this authority of God. So I can act and speak with honesty and integrity. So again, I think it's fine in the eyes of God for you to make vows to your wife or to sign a mortgage document or to vow in court to tell the truth insofar as you are committed to fulfilling those vows. Vows, oaths, and swears should not be done flippantly as if it doesn't matter or hold any weight. And we certainly shouldn't attempt to swear on something lesser intending to break our word. No, our promises and all of our words should be considered seriously. And so you should understand that the same compulsion for you to speak truthfully and honestly for those big, important things in your life is also important in the small things in your life. And so as we kind of dwell on these teachings of Jesus this morning, I think there's a couple of practical applications for us today. And they may seem very elementary and simple, and yet I think you might find it more difficult if you do a little bit of self-searching. The first thing that we can note this morning is this: we should not lie. It's a good personal application here. People say that we never learned what I'm supposed to do with what Jesus says in church. Here's what you should do. Stop lying. And I say that because it's so easy to do. Of course, you knew, if I had asked you before you walked in, is it wrong for us to lie? You knew the answer is yes. And yet still, we find ourselves in situations in which we lie. We saw it clearly presented there in the 10 Commandments from Exodus, and we see it reflected in Jesus' word, and yet we still lie. We lie to others. We lie to ourselves. We lie to God. It's so easy to just lie sometimes. Words do feel cheap. And often we'll convince ourselves that there aren't any consequences to the things that we say. But Jesus is clearly teaching us that the heart of the matter is that we should be people who speak the truth all the time. Our yes should mean yes, and our no should mean no, as he said. People should be able to look at Christians like us and you as an individual and trust instinctively that you are a person who speaks truthfully. In the New Testament, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 25, we have this simple instruction. It says, "Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another." As followers of Christ, the expectation is that you have put away falsehood. And then the default then for you is to speak the truth to your neighbor and to anyone. We are to be people who speak the truth. Or if that's not enough command for you, look at Proverbs chapter 12, verse 22. This very simple little bit of wisdom says this: "Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight." An abomination to the Lord. That's what lying is. Lying disgusts him. He hates it. A lie is the antithesis of the truth. That's why Satan, the enemy, is called the father of lies in the New Testament. Lies stand in opposition to the very character of God. And so when we lie, even over something seemingly small, that lie is an abomination to the Lord. He despises it. It's an affront to his very character. It is sin, a denial of his very nature, all for our personal gain. So obviously, in all things, we should do our very best not to lie at all. Now, as many of you know, this is easier said than done. I would hope that most of you are not habitual liars, but there are always little opportunities in life for you to bend the truth for the sake of convenience or for some kind of perceived good. Now, I don't think that most of you would lie on court documents, or I don't think that most of you would hide something significant from your spouse, for example. But I do know that you might be tempted to lie, just for example, in order to get out of an event that you don't want to attend, right? That seems fairly easy to do. Or you might be tempted to lie to preserve your wife's feelings when she asks you something like, "Do you like my haircut?" You might be tempted to lie in any of these little things, especially if you just want to tell someone what they want to hear in order to end a conversation. Those opportunities for small lies, those things abound in our life. And yet, we should understand that lying is wrong. Do not lie, even if it feels like the easiest way out, because lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. Dr. Robert A. Glover has a good quote about lying. He says this. He says, "Telling the truth is not a magic formula for having a smooth life, but living a life of integrity is actually easier than living one built around deceit and distortion." Listen, I understand. Just a little lie, a little embellishment, that often feels like the easiest way out. And sometimes you know that telling the truth is going to be the harder thing to do, at least in that moment. But this makes sense, does it not? That ultimately, in the end, having told the truth should be the easier thing. Because one lie very often leads to another lie, and another lie, and another lie. You're building this castle of lies to hold up the first lie that you told in the first place, which is ultimately much harder. It is always better for us to speak simply and truthfully. So some time ago, there was a young lady that wanted to sing and lead worship for a youth group that I was a part of. And let me just say this in love. She was terrible. I mean, just awful. She couldn't carry a tune in a backpack. It's like she had never heard any song before in her life. It's almost as if she was trying not to sing the melody. But she was very enthusiastic, and she liked to be up there. I think worship-wise, she was doing kind of the right thing. And one day, after our practice for music, she came up to me and asked me, "Was that good?" This puts me in a difficult position, does it not? So I said, "I really liked your energy and your excitement." That is true. I did like that about her performance. But that answer was not satisfactory for her. She said, "No, was my singing good?" And this is hard, right? I don't want to discourage this poor girl. I don't want to make her feel bad. I don't want to say things that are critical. So I said, "I think it's getting better." I mean, it certainly couldn't have got much worse, right? She's got to be on an upward trajectory of some type, right? So again, I was trying my best to tell the truth and not lie, even though I know that preserving her feelings would be easier. It would have been far easier for me to just say, "Yeah, great singing." But that, especially in that situation, that felt like just an outright lie. I just can't say that, right? So what was the right thing for me to do? Even though I think her feelings are important, understand this: following the commands of God is more important. So yes, being a person who speaks the truth does mean that sometimes you may be put in a situation in which you hurt someone else's feelings. But are their feelings more important than the commands given to you under the authority of God? I don't think they are. We are called to be people who speak the truth in all things. Now, I will say a good strategy for this is to say other true things if you don't want to say the lie. Say other good things. There's positive ways that you can sometimes do this. There are diplomatic ways to handle things without lying. I don't think that that's sinful. But at all times, the call is for us to be people who speak the truth and don't lie. Now, on a bit of a side note, I think it's also relevant to mention what feels like kind of a new development historically in the world of telling the truth and lying, and that new development is AI. AI is very cool. I get that. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it. It has a lot of practical uses and applications, but it's one of its primary uses now that's being thrust upon us in our culture is that it is saying, "I will speak for you." I have Gmail. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I can't reply to an email anymore without AI suggesting what I should say. So it has read the previous email that I received and said, "You might want to say this." And sure, that's convenient for me to just click, "Sure, yeah, send," right? But understand, this is iffy territory for us because the impression is that those are my words. Did I not put those words with my signature at the bottom of the email? But I didn't say those things, did I? Is that not a lie? Or students, you're using AI in your research for school. That's great. I think it can be a helpful research tool. But putting a prompt into AI and then turning that in as a paper or as an essay response with your name on it, that is a lie. You did not say those things. And the teachers in our crowd today will know that it is getting harder and harder for them to be able to even tell the difference between what was AI generated and what was generated by the students. Although I think it's probably fairly easy to tell that the students' stuff is worse, right? But that's because they've fallen into the habit of this pressure from technology to speak for you. And I bring this up because that is easier. And I bring it up also because of this controversial take. Using AI to write or speak for you, or passing off anything that is AI generated as your own thoughts, that is a lie. It's plagiarism, even if there's no particular human victim. And when Jesus says, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no," it is important for us to note that your yes should at the very least be yours, right? Don't pass off something as yours that isn't yours. Sure, use AI for research, fine. It's a helpful tool. You can utilize it in various contexts for all kinds of things. You can even build stuff with it. That's great. But it isn't altogether off limits. But copying words that are not yours and presenting them as if they are is a lie. And at the very least, you should admit when you have used AI for your writing. And on kind of a ministry level, I want you to know that as your pastor, I care for you enough not to use AI in writing my sermons. And I say this because I know pastors who have fallen into this temptation to put a prompt into AI and say, give me a sermon about blank, and it spits out a sermon, and they sometimes, in some cases, will stand up on the platform in front of their congregation, who they are called to love, and present something that they did not write as if it is theirs. That is a lie. I will not do that. If I use AI at all, I will let you know when that's taken place. I don't want you to think that thoughts and ideas that aren't mine are mine. That's plagiarism, not going to do it, period. Okay, side note done. One last thing here from Proverbs chapter 12, verse 22. Look at that verse one more time. It said, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. So I think there's one more simple application for us there. And again, I think you knew this before you came today, but hear it once more. And that is, we should act faithfully according to what we say. In other words, you should do what you say you will do. When our words indicate action, we should prioritize fulfilling what we say. God delights when we do what we say we will do. Our truthful words should be backed up by our actions. We should be reliable and follow through in everything. Now, this can be really difficult in a time and culture in which being flaky is the norm. Unreliability these days seems to be considered a virtue, or at least an acceptable personality trait. But we are meant to stand firm away from our culture and stand out differently in the way that we live as followers of Jesus. We should be people who not only speak the truth, but who follow through on the things that we say we will do. There's this simple command in the New Testament book of Colossians chapter 3, verse 17. It says, and whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. The entirety of our lives, everything that we do, is dedicated to the Lord. All that we say and do is to be done in his name. So we are called to be comprehensively people of truth. Our love of the truth is part of our testimony in a world that is built on lies. So people should be able to see through our actions that Christians should be the most honest, genuine, truthful, reliable people. And when the world sees that, the goal is that they glorify God as a result. Seeing our truthfulness, God should get glory. So as we finish things out for this morning, there's probably, I think, a little bit of self-evaluation in order. We should ask the Lord together as we close in prayer in just a moment to reveal to us any areas of our lives in which we are dishonest. We should ask him to help us and transform us so that we can be comprehensively truthful and reliable people. We should pray that we will be known for our reliability and authenticity, and that others will be drawn to the source of truth because of our truthfulness. And like everything else that we've studied in this Sermon on the Mount, there is once more this reminder for us that we deeply need the grace of Jesus Christ. These are easy ways for us to fail. And we need the grace of Jesus not only to forgive us, but to guide us to be better. So let's try to be people of truth. Let's pray together as we close. God, we thank you that sometimes the Bible is really simple. That sometimes we are able to look at these things and have direct, knowable applications. God, we thank you that you are a God of truth, and that we can understand clearly that if you are a God of truth, then we cannot be people of lies. And yet, God, as simple and easy as all of that seems, I pray that you will help us to actually walk in that kind of truth. Because that part, it appears, is much, much more difficult. Where lying feels so much easier, I pray that you'll help us to be people who tell the truth in all things, in all ways. We pray that you will receive glory by our honesty and integrity in our speech. In your name we pray, amen. Let's stand and close in song today.